Hello friends, my name is Gaurav Gunjkar. I am an IT service architect and I bring you today a short video on service integration and management, SIAM in simple terms. This training video is solely for community service learning and contains information from personal experience, ITIL framework, and information freely available on the web. Today, we are going to look at service integration and management with a simple analogy. Let's consider an example of a teacher who's teaching a few students in her class. Uh, all of the students have very different characteristics and they really don't get along with each other. For example, George and Peppa are constantly competing and they talk a lot, which disturbs the teacher all the time. Skippy doesn't cooperate with anyone and always wants to lead. Pookie and Mickey always fight. They never really agree on anything. So group activities typically become impossible. Minnie talks to no one. She just works in silos and blocks others by hiding their stationery. The students use a wide range of different books. They use different stationery, different colored pens. There's no standardization, and they kind of don't listen to the teacher as well. No, there's no collaboration and no set sequence of tasks and responsibilities when it comes to group activities. This is making the teacher's life very difficult. The teacher is angry and frustrated. If we look at the IT landscape, this is pretty much the scenario everywhere. So the children can be thought of as the suppliers, while the teacher can be looked at as a customer. Now, the vendors typically are not exactly like children, but they exhibit different characteristics where they cannot really get along with each other, or they are constantly competing for something. They work in silos, and this is not a very uncommon scenario in today's IT. The teacher, when she thought thinks about it, has got some bright ideas. Let's look what they are. So the teacher works with another teacher from the same school and comes up with some common classroom etiquette guidelines and procedures for students to follow. This is an example of an internal service integrator wherein the retained client organization assumes the service integrator role. The teacher prescribes the standard stationery relevant books for students so that all of them use the same. The teacher clearly defines everyone's roles and responsibilities and handoffs in group activities, how the parcel is passed. The teacher defines everyone's goals, how they will be measured and evaluated individually and as a group, especially during group activities, and the protocol, how they will work together. Now, the children are typically confused about what's happening, and it is very important for the teacher to bring them on board. This is a scenario with suppliers as well. Suppliers have been working in a certain fashion for a very long time, and if they have to adapt to new ways of working, the change has to happen very gradually and also has to be controlled and managed very well. In this case, it is the job of the internal service integrator who is the client's retained organization. So that in this case, the teacher onboards the students to the new ways of working by explaining role plays, workshops, trainings, etc. The teacher makes them aware of their responsibilities and brings in the cultural shift where the students learn to respect each other and coexist even if they don't like each other. This is organizational or business change management, which is one of the aspects of service integration and management. Let's look at another example wherein the teacher cannot really get help from other teachers in the school. So the teacher brings in an external counselor who assumes the role of a service integrator. So the counselor appoints an external counselor uh, who defines the classroom etiquettes and procedures for students to follow. This is an example of external service integrator, wherein an external entity or a consulting organization assumes the role of a service integrator. The counselor prescribes standard stationery, relevant books, etc., defines everyone's roles and responsibilities and handoffs, and also goals and how they will be measured. Now, in when we think of it in an IT landscape, the external service integrator is basically prescribing common goals, common processes, policies, and common procedures for all suppliers to follow. and which are well aligned to the service integrators policies and processes. The counselor defines everyone's responsibility. This is nothing but a very clear responsibility and accountabilities matrix and handoffs, which are needed when one or more suppliers work with each other in delivery of IT services. The counselor here defines everyone's goals. So similar service integrator lays down goals for each of these suppliers, makes them aware of how they will be evaluated as an individual supplier or as a group. It is then the job of the counselor or the external service integrator to bring all these suppliers on board. Now this is done by in various ways, like training the suppliers, getting them on board, doing role plays, etc., and making them aware of their responsibilities, and also bring in the cultural shift. So the teacher in this case, which is the client in the IT scenario, has a very important role to play in this transformation. Now, it is not only these suppliers who are undergoing the change, but also the client organization, which is going through a change. So, for example, if as part of this transformation, a service catalog is being built in, and the customers have to order things through the service catalog rather than just going to the IT team's desk. This is a big change for them, which needs to be managed and controlled. And it is the job of the counselor and to a certain extent of the client as well to ensure that this cultural shifts happens in a controlled fashion. In another scenario, the teacher has another bright idea. So this has worked very well in schools from time immemorial. So the teacher appoints the most naughty student as the class monitor. When she does that, a lot of fun is taken away anyway. But in this case, yes, it is not the naughty student, but in the IT scenario, it is the lead supplier as the service integrator. The lead supplier is appointed as the service integrator. Obviously, the lead supplier has to have the service integration capabilities. In this case, the lead supplier defines the common processes, common procedures, the common tool, and the target operating model for these suppliers to follow. They prescribe the standard processes, the standard tools, the collaboration framework that is needed for them to share knowledge and work with each other. Obviously, this change, as we spoke, is not a small change, and it is the job of the lead supplier in that case to ensure that these suppliers are brought on. Onto the new ways of working in a gradual and a controlled and managed fashion. In short, the lead supplier also has to have the organizational change or the business change capability. So this is the lead supplier as the service integrator. Moving on, in this case, the teacher takes help of a student or works with a student, or probably more than one student, to ensure that the classroom guidelines are defined and also implemented as part of the student base. Now, this is typically an example of a hybrid service integrator wherein certain retained or client organization and some representatives from one or more suppliers might form part of the service integration area. And the hybrid service integration, then they define common processes, common goals, common policies, a common tool for IT service management, which everyone can follow, or integrations to other tools which need to happen. So this sometimes comes in handy because since they have a representative from each of the supplier, who knows the supplier in and out, it basically helps the client retained organization to understand the supplier very well and then adapt and adopt accordingly. The hybrid SI again has the responsibility of onboarding these suppliers onto the new ways of working and managing the business change. So let's quickly look at what SIAM types did we look at. So the first is the internal service integrator, wherein the client retained organization assumes the role of a service integrator, lays down common processes, common goals, common governance mechanisms, common escalation paths, common tools, which all the suppliers can follow. This improves the transparency. This improves the collaboration between them. Uh, the external service integrator, wherein an external party, a consulting organization or an external entity assumes the role of a service integrator and acts on behalf of the client to manage the collaboration, coordination, and operations between these suppliers for effective and consistent service delivery. The lead supplier as the service integrator, wherein one of the lead suppliers become the service integrator and manages interactions and coordination between all these suppliers for effective and consistent service delivery. And in the end, we have the hybrid service integrator, wherein the customer retained organization works with the representatives of one or more suppliers and lays down the common framework for everyone to follow. Let's look at what activities the service integrator does. So it is basically defining the vision, doing gap analysis, understanding the current problems of the organization is very important to define the roadmap and the transformation strategy. The define the common policies, ITSM processes and procedures. The client might already have some policies and procedures, and this might be an adaptation of that, or it could be completely new policies and procedures that might need to be defined. Define clear RACI matrices, which is responsibility and accountability fixing on each of the suppliers, defining the handoffs as to how tickets and requests flow between them, how they interact with each other in terms of changes. Operational level agreements are set up along with the suppliers to ensure that they deliver to an SLA which the service integrator has towards the customer, although the contracts might be different, but the OLAs typically ensure that service delivery happens. If the service integrator has a resolution SLA of 4 hours to the client, then the OLA with one of the suppliers could be 3 hours 45 minutes to ensure that the service integrator can still service that priority one incident in 4 hours. Establish the operating model. So this is nothing but the new ways of working, who handles what at what level, the governance boards and meetings and the control points in the delivery which are established to ensure that the service is delivered in a consistent fashion. And escalation mechanism, of course, to which has representatives from the suppliers as well as the client and the service integrator to ensure that things are escalated, risks are brought forward at the right point in time, they are accepted or mitigated accordingly. Establish a knowledge and collaboration framework and associated tools. The service integrator might use a tool which the customer already has, or probably introduce a new tool for collaboration. There are several tools in the market for that. Probably, SharePoint, Confluence are some examples of that. But there are several other tools available in the market which could be utilized for collaboration and knowledge sharing. Building a service catalog, request fulfillment flows, and CMDB. This is very important that the customer has a channel by which they can order or request stuff, and they don't necessarily have to call the service desk. So this takes away a certain amount of calls away from the service desk, which leads into efficiency, and also efficiency for the second and third line teams to look at something which is more important or critical, and for the organization to focus on profit making endeavors. The request fulfillment flows typically ensure everything is automated and the customer does not feel a thing. He does not really know how many tasks are assigned to what suppliers and in what sequence are they managed. Uh, he he just receives the service, and the suppliers have a very clearly defined flow of and a task sequence that they need to rapidly perform to ensure that the service is provided to the agreed service levels. A CMDB is very important in the delivery of any IT service. So SIAM doesn't necessarily involve a creation of a new CMDB if it already exists in some shape and size. So as part of the gap analysis, the SIAM team will understand what shape the CMDB is in, and will make some recommendations if the CMDB needs to be revamped. But it is really important that a CMDB exists before the service integrator can begin their operations. And managing organizational change, which is the biggest of all, uh, just to ensure, because there could be a lot of resistance from stakeholders, and simply the amount of change that is happening in the organization could be overwhelming for not only the suppliers but also the client. Let's look at some SIAM benefits. So the consistent customer experience, as we saw, the customers have a clear channel of communication. The first point of contact as the service desk, the a very single service catalog where they can go and request things. So it becomes a very consistent experience for them, and they can be made aware of the service levels so that they know what to expect and when to expect it. Quick supplier on onboarding and offboarding. This becomes very easy with service integrator being a single entity managing the performance across suppliers. Service standardization, as we saw, a common process, a common procedure, a common policy, a common governance, common tool. This ensures that the service is standardized across suppliers, and it is also important that the service integrator should use a tool which the client could retain or the service integrator can offer. So even if one of the suppliers has to be offboarded, they are not taking the tool and the historical data along with them. Efficiency with collaboration, as we just saw, where it is important that when suppliers share knowledge and collaborate with each other, it becomes very easier for them to work together, and it avoids any kind of friction, any kind of delay which could happen by suppliers working in silos. It improves the relationships with a bit of mutual trust, where where the suppliers could come to the service integrator with with certain risks and issues that they want resolved, or they can help to get resolved. And with the collaboration, other parties might come forward to help and resolve common issues. And with the service integrator, it is the issues which lie on the boundary can always be addressed because the service integrator has complete control over the issue. Predictive analysis with automation, with a single ITSM tool being used and several other enterprise management tools feeding into the ITSM tool. A lot of predictive analysis and proactive monitoring could be put in place to ensure that issues could be detected before they occur, and they could be remediated even before the customer knows it. So the ultimate objective is customer delight. The customer never knows that there could have been a potential interruption. The transparency through common tooling, as we saw, everybody has access to the data, of obviously with restricted views, but the service integrator has unlimited access to most of the performance data, with which they can do a lot of analysis and help the client make important decisions. Improved governance and control. So the governance is very important to ensure that the overall delivery is controlled and operations stick to their procedures. It is very important that these deliverables are reviewed on a weekly, monthly basis, or basically a periodic basis. And the SIAM establishes that governance framework and control over delivery. In terms of challenges, uh, the main challenge which typically plagues SIAM is the delegation of authority. Now, a lot of clients want to have service integrators come on and manage the delivery for them, but they are not really happy to give them necessary authority. SIAM without authority is probably of no use. As existing misaligned contracts, so the client might have some contracts with other suppliers even before the service integrator is on board. So these contracts might need to be looked at to ensure that they are either aligned to the service to the contract that the client has with the service integrator, or respective operational level agreements are set up between service integrator and the suppliers. The supplier's readiness and the client's readiness to do that can sometimes be a challenge. Resistance to change is a challenge to almost any kind of transformation, any kind of change, and is also a challenge to SIAM implementation and sustenance. It is very important that this change is managed gradually and controlled, so it becomes acceptable to everyone, and the benefits of it are made public. The relationship history. Suppliers mm, could be working for the client even long before the service integrator comes on board, and they might have a good relationship or there might be a bad relationship history between them. They could be always competing like the children that we saw in the previous slide. They could always be fighting over issues, shifting the blame onto each other before the service integrator came on board. And in this case, the organizational change or the business change management function becomes much more critical to ensure that the relationship history, although it cannot be scrubbed off, but at least the suppliers can be made to respect each other and coexist in the same situation. The internal competition is very detrimental to SIAM, and the service integrator has to ensure that any such acts are appropriately handled. Legacy tooling is not necessarily a challenge always to SIAM, but then the tool should have some capability of integrating with other suppliers' tools and also to some modern predictive analysis and monitoring tools to harness their potential. The end-to-end service commitment. Most of the suppliers look at their area and they never look at the end-to-end picture or the end-to-end service life cycle. They, as long as they have done their part, they don't really care if the service was delivered to the customer. Service integration comes in handy here because the service integrator has a responsibility for end-to-end delivery of the service and is always on top of each stage. So if there are 10 tasks to deliver a service, the service integrator always is on top to check and act if there are any impediments in the middle. And also the service integrator can slowly affect the organization change wherein the suppliers start to look at the big picture. Lack of governance and control. Organizations can sometimes lack governance completely, or they might have little governance in place. So it is very important for service integrator to establish that level of governance and control. In that case, the probably towards the start, the number of control points would be much more than in a usual service integration and management implementation. And eventually, uh, once the service integrator and the overall delivery gets streamlined, those controls could be reviewed again. So, in this short video, we looked at the different types of service integrators. We looked at an analogy to to a classroom with teacher and students. We looked at what the activities the service integrator does, what are the benefits of SIAM, and what are the challenges that SIAM faces. Please stay tuned to my channel for more videos on the same topic. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe to my channel for upcoming videos.